Marilyn Harris. For years, this honoree has asked, what's cooking at your house? How many have heard her say that on the radio? WKRC? All right, a lot of hands. The key is that Marilyn Harris really wants to know. She has been called the Cincinnati's gastronomic guru by Cincinnati Magazine for hosting a weekly cooking show on WKRC on Saturdays from 1 to 4 p.m. That's 156 hours a year on the air, answering questions about recipes, cooking, talking about restaurants, food shops in town, and giving advice about ingredients and menus and entertaining. This year, she celebrates 30 years being on the air. Chuck Martin from the Cincinnati Enquirer wrote, quote, "Restaurant critics, food writers, and trendy chefs come and go, but no one wields as much power on the local food scene as Marilyn." End quote. She's known for her breadth and knowledge of cooking. She famously auditioned for that cooking show without taking any cookbooks or recipes as a backup, because she knew that when she was on the radio, she wouldn't be able to have any resources. Originally from Natchez, Mississippi, the former teen beauty queen and high school valedictorian first learned to cook in New Orleans. She has also studied at Le Cordon Bleu School in London and La Vergne and Bistro du Verre academies in Paris, and with numerous chefs in Lyon. Her role model was Julia Childs, whom she knew personally. Marilyn has written for cookbooks, and formerly was a contributing editor for the Cincinnati Enquirer. Clearly, Marilyn knows her stuff, but it is her gracious personality on the air that has made her the most popular show on WKRC. She has built a reputation and a relationship with her fans for asking for their input. Quote, "Do your duty and check in," end quote, she'll say on the air. And her Enquirer column, she's asked for reader requests, wanting readers to help find recipes for their neighbors, like Ruth Lyon's coffee cake recipe or a recipe for a hot and spicy chow chow. She says, quote, "Every now and then I'll get some real esoteric ethnic food questions, and I'll say, I just don't know the answer to that. And immediately she gets responses by phone and email saying, I know that, Marilyn, I've got your back." She counts on her listeners and readers to put in their 2 cents. On the air and in person, Marilyn Harris is one of Cincinnati's biggest fans. Her honor show, she talks about shopping places like Keegan's and Averill's Meat Market. She shares stories about eating at wonderful Cincinnati restaurants. She is a time capsule of information on restaurants old and new. She asks listeners and readers for dining out updates and wants no harsh critics. Quote, "There are too many wonderful places," she says, "so let's focus on the positives." She and her husband, E.P., were longtime residents of Clifton and very active in the community, and currently she serves on the leadership role on the International Wine Festival Board. She was only willing to move for the right place, but now lives downtown. Marilyn jokes, quote, "My penthouse is my old folks' home," end quote, but with a gorgeous rooftop terrace. She has no plans to slow down anytime soon. She is still entertaining and teaching at home and on the air, and still participates in charity events by hosting dinners and by acting as the MC. And she does a much better job than I do. For making lives taste so much better, Pro Seniors is proud to honor Marilyn Harris as a senior who rocks.
Well, this is really humbling to be on the same program with these people who've done so many wonderful things in their life, and all I do is cook. But I've done a lot of cooking, and it's made my life a really, really interesting one. I came here to Cincinnati right after my husband got his PhD from Tulane University. As he said, I grew up in Natchez, Mississippi. I was from a family where food was really important. Even back in those days, my father was a botanist, and we had gardens of, we didn't have really a typical, we didn't just eat collard greens and cornbread. We had all these interesting foods that nobody else in my circle of friends really had. We had orchards where my father had 4 different kinds of apples growing on one tree because he was always experimenting with, with fruit and things like that. So I really honestly came by my love of food with my background. I always said we were the kind of family that at lunch talked about what we were going to have for dinner. And it was, I think I was in the 7th grade before I ever had a store-bought cookie. I went to a slumber party, and I thought, what are these? I came home and complained. You know how when you're a kid, you want to have what everybody else has. And I'd never seen an Oreo before. So, and I felt, like it was not a good thing. But I obviously now appreciate the fact that I did grow up in the family that gave me an appreciation for real food. I came to Cincinnati on an August day, sort of like what we've had this past week. I mean, inversion, ugly humidity. I was used to living 1 block off of St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans where my husband had just finished his PhD and he came to UC to teach. And we rolled up Dick Smith Avenue off the highway in this, gray, ugly, and I said, well, it's got the same climate, but where's the charm? And I got to love Cincinnati. It was the best thing we ever did in my whole life was to move here. We moved to Clifton. We became such a big part of Clifton. I have so many wonderful Clifton adventures. I was part of the band of bad women who saved the Esquire Theater in Clifton. I was on Clifton Town Meeting Board, and the woman who was president of the board called me at like 11 o'clock at night and said, they're taking all the chairs out of the theater up on Ludlow. And a local Clifton person owned it. I hope he's not here. And we said, it was not a very nice theater. Your feet stuck to the floor, but still it was our neighborhood theater. And we loved it. And then we got the word the next day that it was going to become a fast food joint. And we said, no, that's not going to happen. So we band together, mainly women, although one good buddy, Sid Weil, whom of course you know very well too, one of our good buddies at the time, he was head of the Democratic Party for Hamilton County, and because of him, and he got us so many free legal hours I cannot believe, because it was a real fight in the end. And we won. We took it all the way to state Supreme Court. We were going to be there on the 9th of January. And the owner called us and said, I'm just going to give you all the property. It was New Year's Eve. We were that time, of course, we were we had band together as a nonprofit. And so he said, his lawyer said to us, we're just going to take the tax write-off and give you all the property. And we're moving out of Clifton. And we hope we never see you ever again in our whole lives. Because we had been 4 years of being just totally obnoxious. But we won. And it's just, every time I drive down Ludlow Avenue, I think, what would this look like if it was all fast food joints, And we got it zoned, no fast food, forever and eternity. Somebody would have to spend so much money, and they would have to overturn the whole state, in the whole Supreme Court to get it, So I did lots of stuff like that in Clifton. I loved Clifton. In the meantime, what did I know how to do? I knew how to cook. And my husband had taken me to Germany. He was a guest professor, but first he was a student at the University of Berlin, and we went there, and I didn't speak one word of German. And I said, I'm not going to live here and be an ugly American. I'm going to learn this language. It almost killed me, and I really had, but I was 22, and you can do anything when you're 22. And we lived in an apartment that had no hot water. We shared a toilet upstairs with another family, and we had running coal water, and we had a stove that burned coal that by the time we didn't figure out how it really worked until spring came and we were almost frozen. But we did it, and we did it together, and we've been married 53 years, and we're still together, and I think part of it is because we had that experience that so many people don't have these days of really being able to, not have, we had enough food because I knew how to cook. The fact that I knew how to cook is how we're still here today. Otherwise, I don't know what would, on a 2-burner gas hot plate. And I learned the language, which was, a very, very interesting thing to do. And then we went back to Tulane, and my husband finished his PhD. And we came here. And then 20 years later, we went back to Berlin, and he was a guest professor at the university. And we had this gorgeous apartment. I'm like, my God, it's got hot water. And we had, of course, a wonderful year. But I'm so grateful to him. He's not here tonight because he's ill, but I'm so grateful for him for dragging me over. A little girl from Natchez, Mississippi, and he's like, we're going to Berlin, and you're going to learn German. And I went, what? But I did. And in the midst of it all, I cooked. I went, life is so funny. It's like what happens to us, that it's the things that happen to us that make who we are and where we're going to go, and nobody really has any control over that. It's just what happens. And I was at a dinner party, and I sat next to the guy who was the president of a department store here in Cincinnati called Pogues. Do you guys remember Pogues? It was a beautiful department store. And he said to me, and he was from New Orleans, a very charming man. He said, I was just out of culinary school. And we went back to Germany 5 times. I'm not telling you my whole life, but anyway, at one point when we were back there, I had gone to London and gotten my certificate at the Cordon Bleu School, and I had gotten a degree initially in food and nutrition. So I was kind of, ready to do something interesting. And he said, I'm going to open up this big area on the first floor of the store. It's going to be called the 4th Street Market, and I want to have gourmet housewares and a wine bar. And it was really before its time, you all. I mean, Macy's Cellar was going on in New York, but it was nothing like the 4th Street Market at Pogues. It was so ahead of its time. And he said, I can use somebody with your credentials, And I said, well, thank you very much, honey, but I don't want to work at a department store. And so he called me the next morning, 9 o'clock, and said, would you like to have lunch with me today at the Queen City Club? I know you don't want to work at a department store, but I just would like to pick your brain a little bit, and since you're a Southern girl, So I came home and I said to my husband, well, maybe I would like to work at a department store. He talked me into it, so I helped him start that whole department, and I started a cooking school, the 4th Street Market Cooking School, and I ran it for 8 years, and I brought people to town like all sorts of, big names, and like Marcella Hassan and Jacques Pepin, and, I really, my whole goal was to kind of, I was traveling around the country. I belonged to a group, an organization for food professionals, and I thought, why can't we do all that in Cincinnati? So they came in one day and said, the radio station around the corner, the secretary of the manager took my cooking classes. I took 3 days a week. I taught a class called Lunch and Learn, and it would be a 1-hour class. And instead of going to lunch downtown, and a lot of attorneys came, and Crew Tower, a lot of P&G people came, a lot of wonderful people came, and we had 1 hour, and I would teach them something, and they would eat, and they'd go back to work with their recipe in hand. And she said, we've got a cooking show, and they're ladies leaving town, and we need somebody just 2 days a week. Could you just run over there for an hour 2 days a week and do a cooking show? I said, sure. So that's how the Cooking with Marilyn show got started, and last week it was 30 years. And I do always ask people, what's cooking at your house, because I'm interested. And I like to think that I've been a part of, food is so important. It's not saving anybody's life or, doing anything wonderful like some of these other people here, but it's such a part of our life, and it's such a part of our society and our family, and having good food, I think, is so important. And there's such a difference in just cooking and cooking food that really tastes good, and that's been, I sort of think of myself as a food missionary. That's really been my life, to help people understand that it's not that hard to do, and it's such a wonderful thing to be able to enjoy good food. Inside every old person, there's a young one saying, what the hell happened? And that's kind of the way I felt when they called me. I went, oh my God, I'm a senior. How did that happen? So, but it does happen, and we, life just gets better. did have the pleasure of knowing Julia Child, and we belonged to the same group, the same International Association of Culinary Professionals, which way back when was the American Association of Cooking Teachers, when there were about 600 of us. But so I knew her when we had a small crowd. And the last time she was in Cincinnati, I had lunch with her. And I just got to know so many wonderful people in the food business. The food and wine people in the world, you all, are the people to hang out with because they're the great people. And I'm so blessed to have been able to do that. On the board for the International Wine Festival, we gave $350,000 this year to charity from the International Wine Festival. A lot of people don't realize it's for charity, but it's a win-win. You get to have fun, drink wine, and contribute to charity. I'm very happy to accept this award now that I'm just going to have to accept the fact that I am indeed a senior. I'm so sorry my husband can't be here because he's been, I wouldn't be we all are who we are because of the experiences we have in life, and things come along and you just do them. And if I hadn't lived in Europe 5 times and studied all over the place and done all that, if I hadn't been married to him, I wouldn't have done that, and I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate all my wonderful friends who are here this evening, and on their behalf, I would like to accept this award and say thank you so much.